My cousin stole my whole identity to get into college, and my family backed her like she earned it. She took my essay, my grades, even my scholarship. So I reapplied all right and signed up for a surprise they'd never forgive. When the acceptance letter came, my mom screamed so loud the neighbors came outside. "She did it! She got into Duke!" she yelled, waving the envelope like a winning lottery ticket. Except the she wasn't me. It was my cousin, Jenna. I stood in the doorway, frozen, watching my aunt cry tears of joy while my uncle popped open a cheap bottle of champagne. Everyone was hugging, shouting, and taking pictures. Jenna's smile was plastered across her face, the same fake, polite smile she wore every time she got what she wanted. But this time, she hadn't just wanted something. She'd taken everything. I knew before the party that something was off. I'd been waiting for my own email from Duke, the one I'd been working toward since freshman year. But when I checked my portal, it said, "Duplicate submission detected." I thought it was a glitch. I called the admissions office, and what they told me made my stomach drop. They said my application, same essay, same GPA, same extracurriculars, had already been submitted. Under a different name. Jenna's. The essay was mine. Word for word. The volunteer hours, the personal story about Dad dying of cancer, the GPA from my transcript. She had submitted my entire identity under her name, and Duke bought it. When I confronted my mom, she told me to calm down. She said, "It's just college, don't ruin this for your cousin." My aunt chimed in, "You can always reapply. Jenna needs this more than you do." I swear, I felt something inside me break right then. They all looked at me like I was the problem, like I was selfish for wanting my own life back. My dad's memory, my hard work, my future, all swallowed up by this family lie they'd apparently agreed to keep quiet about. Jenna walked up to me later that night with her fake little sympathy tone and said, "I know this sucks for you, but you'll find your path. Maybe community college is better anyway." I didn't slap her, I just smiled, and that scared her more, because right then I decided I wasn't going to let this go, not after what they did, not after how they made me feel like I didn't even exist. They wanted me erased. Fine. I'd give them a reason to remember my name. And a few months later, when I reapplied under another name, they found out exactly how far I was willing to go to burn their perfect little plan to the ground. Jenna and I grew up like sisters, at least that's what everyone said. She lived just 2 streets over in Durham, and our families were always together, cookouts, birthdays, holidays. We were the same age, same grade, even looked a little alike if you didn't look too hard. But underneath all that, there was always this quiet tension between us. See, I was the good kid, the straight-A one, the one who stayed up late studying, did debate, volunteered at the shelter, all that. Jenna was the opposite. Barely passed classes, always caught cheating, constantly grounded. My aunt used to sigh and say, "Why can't you be more like your cousin?" Which was awkward because I'd be sitting right there. She hated me for that. I could see it in her eyes every time someone compared us. It all got worse junior year when I started getting serious about college. Duke had always been my dream. My dad went there before he passed away, and I made it my mission to follow in his footsteps. I built everything around that goal, top of my class, captain of debate, leadership programs, volunteering. Every move was calculated. And Jenna, she coasted, barely graduated, never applied herself. But my aunt and uncle were obsessed with image. They didn't want anyone knowing their daughter was flunking while her little orphan niece, as they liked to call me after Dad died, was outshining everyone. Then senior year hit, and I made a stupid mistake. I helped Jenna. She said she wanted to apply to community college and asked me to look over her essay. I said sure, thinking she was finally getting serious. She came over one afternoon, borrowed my laptop, and said she needed inspiration from my drafts. She asked if she could email herself some examples to get ideas from. I didn't think twice. That night, I noticed a few files missing from my computer, including my finished Duke essay. I panicked, but she swore she didn't touch anything, said I probably deleted it by accident. I was so busy juggling finals and scholarship applications, I just let it go. A week later, she told me she'd decided not to apply anywhere right now. I believed her. Turns out she didn't just take my essay, she took everything. She used my GPA, my volunteer hours, my debate awards, and my personal essay about losing Dad. My aunt had connections at the school district, and they helped her pull a fake transcript. My mom, She knew, they all knew. They said they were evening things out. Their excuse was that Jenna needed a break, that I'd land on my feet anyway. It wasn't about fairness, it was about pride. My aunt couldn't stand the idea of her daughter looking like a failure next to me. And my mom, she just didn't want to make waves. So while I was checking my inbox for my Duke acceptance letter, Jenna already had hers in her hand, smiling for pictures in a cap and gown she didn't earn. But they underestimated one thing. They thought I'd just accept it. Move on, go small. They didn't know that I'd already started something behind their backs, something that would blow up months later and take their entire plan down in flames. After that night, something inside me flipped. I stopped begging anyone to believe me. I just went quiet. I still had my backup applications, smaller schools, nothing like Duke, but I didn't send them. Not yet. I needed to think bigger. I needed to find a way to prove what they did and make sure it destroyed every single one of them. But first, I played nice. I congratulated Jenna in front of everyone, smiled at her graduation party, even helped her pack for college. She ate it up, thought she'd won. My mom and aunt were so smug they could barely look me in the eye. They thought I'd accepted my place. Meanwhile, I was collecting. I went through my old emails and found the message Jenna sent to herself from my laptop, the one with my essay attached. I saved it. I looked up metadata from the file and saw it was originally created under my name and my device ID. That was proof. I also found screenshots of my original grades and activity logs from the school's online portal. But I wasn't going to the police or Duke admissions yet. Not yet. Because what they did was fraud, and once you drop that bomb, it's not something you can control anymore. I didn't just want justice. I wanted to control how it unraveled, so I waited until she started at Duke. Jenna posted nonstop on Instagram about college life, her dorm, the friends she was making. It was all fake. She never mentioned that she was drowning academically because she couldn't keep up. I saw her crying in a TikTok once about mean professors. I almost felt bad. Almost. That's when I sent my own application, but not as myself. I created a new identity, slightly tweaked name, different address, same academic record. I sent it to Duke under early transfer consideration. I didn't expect to get in, not right away, but I did it to plant a seed, a paper trail. At the same time, I started emailing the admissions office from an anonymous account. I said I was a student who discovered that someone had submitted a fraudulent application using stolen material. I attached partial proof, the essay file, some records. I said I'd provide full documentation once they confirmed receipt. It didn't take long. Within a week, I got an email from a Duke administrator asking for more details. I ignored it for a bit. I wanted them to dig. While that was happening, Jenna came home for Thanksgiving break, acting like she was royalty. Everyone treated her like a success story. "Jenna, tell us about your classes. Jenna, what's it like at Duke?" She looked at me and smirked like she'd buried me. But she didn't know I'd already gotten a strange text from a number I didn't recognize, a 919 area code. It said, "This is Duke admissions. We need to confirm something regarding your application records." They didn't mean mine. They meant hers. And that was the moment I realized this was about to get a whole lot bigger than a stolen essay. The email came 3 days after Thanksgiving. Subject line, urgent. Verification required. Academic integrity inquiry. It was from Duke's Office of Admissions, addressed to Jenna, but it was CC'd to me. I don't know how that happened. Maybe some admin assistant mixed up our info, or maybe Karma just decided to show off that day. The message was short and cold. "We have reason to believe materials submitted under your name were copied from another applicant. Please contact our office immediately to discuss verification of authorship and records." I remember staring at the screen, shaking. It was real. They were investigating her. Within hours, Jenna called me, crying so hard I could barely understand her. "They're saying I cheated. They're saying I stole my essay. Why would someone do this to me?" I wanted to laugh, but I played dumb. "Wow, that's crazy," I said. "What essay?" She started rambling about a misunderstanding. How someone must have hacked her files. I just listened. Calm, quiet, pretending to be supportive. But later that night, my aunt called my mom. I could hear everything through the thin walls. "She's behind this," my aunt hissed. "You know she is. Your daughter's jealous, and she's trying to ruin Jenna's life." My mom didn't even deny it. She said, Well, maybe she has a right to be angry. You shouldn't have gone along with that plan. I froze. That plan. That was the first time I heard them say it out loud, confirmation that my mom had known exactly what they'd done. She wasn't just a bystander. She'd helped. A week later, Jenna was summoned to a disciplinary hearing. They wanted her to provide the original drafts of her essay and proof of her volunteer work. She called me again, desperate. Please, she begged. Can you send me your essay file? Just so I can show them I didn't copy it word for word. You can change a few things before sending it. I almost dropped my phone laughing. You want my essay to prove you didn't steal my essay? She started screaming, calling me selfish, evil, vindictive. I just told her, welcome to college, cousin, and hung up. 2 days later, Duke rescinded her admission. Full academic expulsion, record flagged for fraud, her scholarship gone. My aunt went ballistic. She showed up at our house, screaming in the driveway, accusing me of destroying the family. Mom told me to stay inside, but I heard every word. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. She promised you'd help, and we agreed to split it with you. That was the deal. I stopped breathing for a second. Split what? When I checked my emails later that night, I found it buried in my mom's sent folder on our shared family laptop. A copy of an agreement between my aunt and my mom. They had divided my Duke scholarship money before Jenna even applied. They had planned it together. They sold my future. And that's when I stopped thinking about revenge as something emotional. It became strategy. Because if they were willing to make me disappear for money, then I could make them disappear, too, but legally, publicly, and in a way they could never recover from. When the dust settled and Jenna's acceptance was gone, the house felt like a morgue. My aunt sat at the kitchen table with her face in her hands, my mom sneaking looks at her phone like it held the answer to everything. They wanted me to break, to apologize, to pretend none of it mattered. Instead, I sat down with a legal pad and wrote the names of everyone who'd helped. My aunt, my mom, the school admin who'd pulled the fake transcript, and the cousin who'd smiled while stealing my life. I wrote what each of them had taken. I wrote, in cold block letters, what justice looks like. I did not want petty revenge. I wanted something that would remove the safety net that had let them do this in the first place. I wanted the world to know the truth in a way that would hurt them where they were fragile. Their reputation, their finances, their sense of belonging in the town that watched them like gods. I wanted them to feel exposed, humiliated, and legally tangled for a long time. So I made a plan that was about exposure, not violence. I mapped out 3 fronts: administrative, legal, and public. Legal meant consulting an attorney to understand the fraud statutes and to file complaints without making myself legally vulnerable. Public meant finding someone who could tell the story without me sounding like the bitter cousin who resented a win. I wanted facts, not feelings, and a platform that would make everyone in our town read them. I called a lawyer. I told her the skeleton of the story and watched her face go from polite to interested. She asked for evidence, and suddenly my hoard of emails and metadata wasn't just petty proof. It was a bloody, tidy trail. She explained what the complaints would look like, what kinds of agencies we could notify, and how subpoena power could force the school district and my aunt's contacts to hand over records. She didn't tell me how to fake anything. She told me how to use what I had to make them accountable. That felt like a weapon that didn't require me to become someone I wasn't. At the same time, I reached out to a local investigative reporter I'd once helped at a food drive, someone who had a nose for privilege and loved knocking people off their pedestals. I didn't send a dramatic email. I sent a folder, time-stamped drafts, screenshots of the messages from Duke, the copy of the agreement in my mom's sent folder where they'd literally divided my scholarship. The reporter replied within hours. She called the next morning. "This isn't small-town gossip," she said. "If this is true, it's a warm little scandal." I felt something quietly lethal settle in my chest, but even as the legal gears turned and the reporter started asking questions, I knew they would fight back. My aunt had money and pride. She would lawyer up and shriek about character assassination. My mom would try to spin it into a narrative about helping family. Jenna would cry to anyone who would listen. So I built contingencies, extra copies of everything, records backed up in different places, a spreadsheet of who I'd told and when. I did not plan illegal acts. I planned a siege by truth. Then, the week before I was supposed to hand over the last piece of evidence to the reporter, something happened that no spreadsheet could predict. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number that made my stomach drop. A photo of my father's old fraternity pin, the one my aunt had always coveted, with a caption that read, "We still have what connects us to Duke." It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. And it told me one terrifying thing: whatever I pulled, they'd pull back harder. I thought the hardest part was convincing strangers the truth. I thought the hard part would be watching my family unravel under the weight of proof. I wasn't ready for the part where the world decided to make me look like the monster. The reporter I trusted, the one who called me solid and asked for timestamps and metadata, met me at a diner and nodded like a priest. She asked calm, professional questions, took photos of my files, told me she'd hold the story until I wanted it live. She promised anonymity for some things. I left feeling both exposed and strangely relieved. Finally, someone who would strip the town's varnish off the house my aunt built. 2 days later, my phone lit up with a headline that made my chest rent in half. It was the paper's site. Front page, my name in the URL. The piece wasn't the piece we'd discussed. It started with the fraud, the rescinded acceptance, the doctored transcript, then moved into a different, awful narrative. Screenshots of messages I never sent, quotes attributed to me accusing Jenna of stealing my legacy, and a line from the school district official suggesting someone had fabricated evidence to frame Jenna. They published emails from the district I didn't recognize and a sworn statement from an administrative assistant claiming I had contacted admissions first, not anonymously, but under my real account, threatening to ruin Jenna if she didn't give me my due. I stared at the article until my eyes blurred. My stomach collapsed. Everything I'd been holding, drafts, metadata, my lawyer's notes, felt suddenly brittle like cheap glass. I called the reporter. The call went to voicemail. I called the lawyer. She picked up once, voice professional and clipped. "We have a conflict. I'm withdrawing. I've already filed the withdrawal. You should retain new counsel immediately." When I demanded why, she said, "There are connections you don't know about." I can't, and hung up. 2 betrayals in 24 hours. They hit me like coordinated punches. It didn't take long to find out how. The school admin, the one who'd pulled the fake transcript for Jenna, had a sister who worked at the paper. She'd called, handed over a narrative that cast my evidence as too neat, too perfect. She produced an email trail that made it look like I had sent threatening messages from my account to admissions and to Jenna, and to the reporter. The paper printed that trail as if it were gospel. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that the metadata I'd collected, the file histories, the device IDs, they'd been subtly altered. Not by a crank on the internet. By someone who knew exactly where to touch the records. The district tech guy my aunt bribed. The kind of person who can spin a server log to whisper whatever story you pay for. He'd backdated an entry, flagged an IP address as mine, and routed some of the most damning emails through a proxy that, on paper, pointed to my account. My lawyer's conflict was less coincidence than practical business. She worked at a firm that handled education contracts for the district. When the district called to say there was litigation coming, she signed off, withdrew, and the firm quietly refused to take me on in any capacity that would create a clash with their client. Within 72 hours, I'd been publicly painted as vindictive, my evidence questioned, and I was served with a subpoena for my laptop. My aunt and mom started showing up at church doorways with sympathetic neighbors, determined looks in their eyes like predators that had suddenly smelled blood and decided to feast. When the legal notice hit my phone, a formal complaint from Jenna's lawyer accusing me of cyber-stalking, harassment, and producing forged documents, I felt the floor fall away. The town had inverted the truth into a hall of mirrors where I was the one trying to smash the frame. But in the middle of that catastrophe, something else happened. A name I hadn't expected to see popped up in the list of people copied on the complaint. The reporter's editor. And attached to the complaint, below the district's manufactured emails, was a single forwarded message from an anonymous account with one line. "If you want the rest, meet me at the county library, 11 a.m. tomorrow. Bring proof." It was a trap, maybe a setup, maybe the only real opening I had left. By the time I shut my laptop, my phone buzzing with robocalls from unknown numbers, I realized I had to choose. Run or walk straight into the place they thought they'd catch me. I showed up at the library 10 minutes early, sitting in one of those squeaky plastic chairs that smell like cleaning spray and old paper. I expected a trap, maybe a reporter, maybe someone from the district ready to serve another notice. Instead, a man in his late 40s walked in. Blue polo, ID lanyard from the county education office. He looked tired, guilty. He sat down across from me, slid a flash drive across the table, and said quietly, "Don't talk, just listen." He told me he was the IT admin for the district, the same one who'd pulled Jenna's transcript for the fake application, the same one who'd mysteriously made the digital evidence look like I was the fraudster. He said my aunt had been paying him for months, not just to fake the records, but to cover up something much bigger. Apparently, Duke wasn't even the first time she'd done this. Back when my dad was sick, my mom and aunt had borrowed money from his life insurance fund to cover family medical expenses. That's what they told the bank. But my aunt had funneled part of that money into a separate account, one tied to the district's scholarship grant system, under a fake donor name. She used that account to pay the admin, to reward certain teachers who inflated Jenna's grades, and to quietly erase failing marks from her record. It wasn't about jealousy anymore. It was about laundering stolen money. They'd stolen from my father, the man they pretended to mourn, and used that money to fake Jenna's entire academic career. When Duke's system flagged duplicate submission, the paper trail nearly exposed that old account. If the school had dug deeper, they wouldn't have just caught Jenna's fraud. They'd have uncovered years of forged scholarships tied to my dad's death benefits. That's why they turned on me so viciously. That's why my mom kept saying, "Don't make this worse." If I pushed it, they'd all go down not just for identity theft, but for embezzlement and fraud. The IT guy looked like he hadn't slept in days. "I was supposed to scrub everything and make you look unstable," he said, "but I kept copies. They don't know I did." He slid me the flash drive. Everything's on there. The fake donor account, the emails, the bank transfers, your mom's signatures. If you want them to burn, this is the match. I just sat there shaking. I wanted to scream, cry, throw up, anything. But all I could feel was this numb, icy clarity spreading through me. They hadn't just stolen my college future. They'd stolen my dad's legacy. They used his death to fund Jenna's fake life. That was the why. They didn't do it because Jenna deserved it more. They did it because they'd already built a house of lies on my father's grave, and my success would have cracked the foundation. The man stood up. "You didn't hear my name," he said, and walked out. I plugged in the drive later that night. Everything was there, the forged signatures, the secret payments, even the text thread between my mom and aunt saying, "Once Jenna's in, we're clean. No one will ever question the transfer." They weren't protecting Jenna. They were protecting themselves. And now, I finally had the full story and every piece of evidence I needed to end it, publicly and permanently. I walked into the state attorney's office with a manila folder and the kind of calm that comes from having already rehearsed the worst 100 times. The IT guy wanted nothing to do with court. He'd already quit, slipped town with his head down. He'd left me the drive and a note, "Don't do anything stupid. Do it legally." I owed him my life and my grip on what felt like the last clean thing left of my dad. I handed everything to the assistant DA. The flash drive, bank records, the forged scholarship ledgers, the emails with my mom and aunt's signatures. I also handed the reporter the copy I had kept, the one who'd been honest with me from the start, the one who'd said, "If this is true, it's a warm little scandal." She put it on her editor's desk and watched him swallow. He called the paper's legal counsel. We waited, and it was the kind of wait that's raw and metallic, the opposite of relief. Within 2 weeks, the county auditors started asking questions. Duke reopened their integrity review and pulled Jenna's record back into their office. The district's finance director was placed on administrative leave. The paper printed a follow-up piece, this time with documents, not rumors. Screenshots of transfers from my father's account to the fake donor fund, invoices for grade adjustments, emails where my aunt and mom talked about securing Jenna's future. The town that had once whispered sympathy at our porch now read the ledgers in the public square. My aunt and mom were indicted on charges I never thought I'd see attached to their names: embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy. The school admin who'd been making edits to server logs was fired and later charged. Jenna. Her admission was permanently revoked. She was suspended from the district, and the scholarship money they claimed they'd split evaporated under forensic accounting. She still cried to anyone who would listen, but the phone calls stopped coming from our neighbors. Court was uglier than I expected. My mom testified with that wounded look she used to get when someone asked about Dad, the performance she'd perfected. My aunt tried to blame everyone but herself. Their lawyers spun stories about desperation and doing what families do. Criminal intent doesn't care about clever lawyers for long. The evidence was meticulous, time-stamped, and backed up in 3 places. The DA called it a pattern of theft and deceit, and the jury listened. When the verdicts came, the relief was not a shout. It was a small, sudden exhale I didn't realize I'd been holding. They were convicted. The judge ordered restitution. The town watched as my parents were publicly stripped of the reputation they'd built on borrowed money and privileges. People asked me if I felt triumphant. The honest answer was no, at least not in the way you imagine. What I felt walking out of that courthouse was something harder to name: reclamation. My name was back in circulation not as an accusation, but attached to facts. Duke sent a letter months later, not the old acceptance, but an offer to interview for their transfer program with full consideration of my initial credentials and the context of what had happened. I declined. I wanted to go to a school where my effort was the main story, not the court transcripts. I chose a university closer to home, one that offered me a scholarship based on my merits, and oddly on the attention the case brought to systemic problems in the district. People still talk about the scandal in Durham like it's a cautionary tale. At family gatherings now, there are fewer hugs and more guarded looks. My mom writes me occasionally, not to apologize directly, but to ask how I'm doing. I don't hate her, I hate what she chose. That distinction keeps me sane. Revenge didn't fix my grief. It didn't bring my dad back or make up for months of being gaslit by the people who were supposed to protect me. But it put the ledger back where it belonged. It made their lies expensive. It gave my name back its context. And the last, small thing I did because I'm petty and human, I wrote Duke, class of not yours, on an old acceptance envelope and stuck it in the frame where their stolen picture used to be. It hangs there like a quiet, accurate obituary for the life they thought they could steal.